In the quiet gray of early morning, when the city still yawned and stretched itself awake, Alice walked along the cracked sidewalks with her bag slung over her shoulder, her steps steady but heavy with fatigue. She was a young nurse, her uniform neatly pressed despite the wear of long shifts, her face tired but her eyes carrying a kind of light that came only from someone who cared deeply for others. She had spent years working tirelessly, not only saving lives in the hospital but also saving every penny she could in pursuit of one modest dream: to finally buy a car of her own. She had walked to work every day in the rain, in the cold, in the suffocating summer heat. She had stood in buses too crowded to breathe, sacrificing comfort so she could save enough to take one small step toward freedom. And at last, that day had come. She had the envelope of money in her bag, her savings collected and ready. Today was supposed to be the day she walked into the dealership, signed her name, and drove home in her very first car. But fate is strange. It never warns us when it plans to test us. As Alice turned a corner, the world shifted. A man in a black jacket stepped out from the shadows, his face half hidden, his voice rough and demanding. "Your bag," he barked, his eyes darting nervously around. Alice froze. Her heart thundered against her ribs as her hands clutched the strap of the bag. Inside was everything. Years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, skipped meals, her dream made tangible in crumpled bills. She tried to plead, her voice trembling, but the thief's hand reached with violent impatience, ripping the strap from her shoulder. In a moment, the bag was gone, and with it the car, the dream, the years of struggle. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear alone, but from the shattering heartbreak of losing everything she had worked so hard for. Her knees weakened, her breath shallow, and she thought of how cruel life could be. She whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "Why now? Why today?" But life, just as it has its cruelty, sometimes balances itself with sudden, unexpected kindness. At that exact moment, a car slowed near the curb, a sleek black luxury vehicle that seemed out of place in the dusty street. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man, tall, handsome, and confident in a way that could not be taught. Christian. His eyes, sharp and alert, caught the scene in an instant. The thief running, Alice on the ground in despair. Without hesitation, Christian sprinted after the thief. He was fast, his determination burning like fire. Alice could hardly process what was happening as she watched him chase through the crowded sidewalk, dodging startled pedestrians. Minutes felt like hours, but when Christian finally returned, breathing heavily, he held the bag in his hands. The thief was gone, but the envelope of money was still intact. Christian knelt before Alice, his eyes softening as he handed it to her. "Here," he said simply, his voice deep but kind. "It's yours." Alice stared at him, stunned, her tears falling freely now. Relief crashed over her like a wave, mixed with gratitude so overwhelming she couldn't find the words. She took the bag in shaking hands, whispering, "Thank you, thank you. You don't know what this means to me." Christian looked at her curiously, almost as if he wanted to understand. "Then tell me," he said gently, "why was it so important?" And so, sitting on the steps of a closed shop, with the morning sun slowly painting the city gold, Alice told him her story, about the long walks to the hospital, the endless hours caring for patients, the quiet dream of owning a car so her life could be a little easier, so she could arrive to work without exhaustion already weighing her down. Christian listened, not interrupting, his eyes never leaving hers. For the first time in years, Alice felt seen, not just as a nurse, not just as a tired young woman chasing a dream, but as someone whose story mattered. What Alice didn't know yet was that Christian was no ordinary passerby. He was a man of wealth, the kind who never worried about buses or money for a car. Yet in that moment, sitting beside her, none of that mattered. He wasn't the rich man in the expensive car. He was just a man touched by the strength of a woman who had endured so much with grace and determination. And something shifted in both of them. A spark, quiet but undeniable, flickered to life. Alice didn't know it then, but the stranger who had saved her dream would soon change her life forever. And Christian, The man who seemed to have everything didn't realize yet that in saving Alice's money, he had just found something far more valuable, something he didn't even know he was searching for. This was the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted, a story of courage, second chances, and love born in the unlikeliest of places. The days after the incident replayed in Alice's mind like a film she could not pause. Every time she walked down the street, she remembered the terror of the moment when her dream had nearly been snatched away, and then the striking image of Christian stepping in, fearless, determined, almost as if destiny had arranged his presence there. She would wake up earlier for her shifts at the hospital, tired from long hours, yet she carried a strange warmth inside her chest. It wasn't only relief for having her money back. It was something new, something she had not felt in years. A spark of hope that her life could finally shift from its endless routine of work, sacrifice, and quiet solitude. Christian, too, found his thoughts drifting back to that evening. He had lived surrounded by wealth, luxury, and attention, but none of those things ever gave him the sensation he had felt when Alice looked at him with those wide, tearful eyes, filled with gratitude and trust. He could not shake the image of her simple clothes, the determination in her tired posture, and the quiet dignity she carried even in her vulnerability. It was unlike anything he had ever known. He was used to people who sought his company for his name, his money, his family connections. But Alice had no idea who he really was, and still, there was something in her gaze that made him feel like, for the first time, someone had seen him not as Christian the wealthy heir, but simply as Christian, the man. 2 days after the assault, Alice's phone buzzed. She had given Christian her number quickly after the chaos, not expecting much. But now his name flashed across her screen. Her heart skipped. He wanted to know if she was okay, if she had been able to finally buy the car, if she felt safe. She smiled softly at the message, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed back. Their conversation flowed easily, surprising both of them. What started with polite concern stretched into hours of back and forth, as though they had known each other for years. Christian was fascinated by the way Alice spoke about her patients. Despite her exhaustion, her heart was always focused on helping others. She told him stories of elderly patients who had no family, of children who were afraid of the hospital but calmed down when she held their hands, of coworkers who were equally overworked but who made her laugh in the hardest moments. Every word she shared painted her soul more vividly, and Christian found himself craving her honesty, her kindness, her strength. Alice, in turn, discovered that Christian, despite his refined way of speaking and hints of wealth in his words, was gentle, curious, and surprisingly humble. He asked her about her dreams, her favorite songs, the things she had once wanted to do before life pushed her into endless responsibilities. No one had asked her those questions in years, not with genuine interest. He listened. He remembered every detail she said. It was disarming, and it was beautiful. When they finally agreed to meet again, Alice hesitated. She wore her simple jeans and modest blouse, unsure if she was enough. She almost canceled, but something inside her whispered that she had already been seen by him, truly seen. So she walked to the cafe where they had planned to meet, her heart pounding like a drum. And there he was. Christian stood by the window, sunlight framing his figure, his eyes lighting up as soon as he saw her. He moved toward her with an ease that made the world feel softer. She expected him to act distant, as people with wealth often did with those below them. But instead, he treated her as though she were the only person in the room. They spent hours talking, laughing, even sitting in comfortable silence. Alice shared how she had saved every coin for months to buy the car, and Christian listened with admiration, not pity. He spoke of his own loneliness in a world that seemed to have everything yet often felt empty. For the first time in a long time, he confessed his truth, that money and luxury never filled the silence of his nights. Alice looked at him then, her eyes reflecting a compassion that melted through his carefully built defenses. Days turned into weeks. Their bond grew naturally, like sunlight through a window no one had opened in years. They met after Alice's long shifts, sometimes just walking quietly through the park, other times sharing simple meals that tasted better because of the company. Christian never once tried to impress her with his wealth, though it was impossible for Alice not to notice his expensive car, his clothes, his way of moving in the world. Yet what mattered was that he never used those things as walls. Instead, he used his heart, his honesty, and his gentleness as bridges. Alice found herself smiling more at work. Her co-workers noticed, teasing her about the secret glow on her face. She brushed them off, but inside, she knew they were right. Something had changed. She was falling in love. And Christian. He had stopped attending the endless parties his friends threw, finding them empty now. He preferred the quiet joy of walking Alice home, listening to her talk about her patients, watching her laugh at the smallest jokes. She reminded him of what truly mattered, of a life far richer than money could ever buy. But not everything was simple. Alice's insecurities lingered. She would sometimes glance at Christian's world and feel like she did not belong there. What would his family think of her? What would people say when they saw a wealthy heir holding hands with a nurse who had scraped every penny just to buy a car? Those doubts haunted her, like shadows whispering she was not enough. She kept them hidden, but Christian saw through her silence. He sensed her fears, though she never spoke them. And in his heart, he promised himself he would prove to her that love was not about status or wealth, but about souls that recognized each other in the chaos of life. One evening, as the city lights flickered alive, Christian looked at Alice and whispered words that made her heart race. "You don't have to walk alone anymore. Not in the streets, not in life." Alice felt tears well in her eyes, not of sadness, but of a joy she had never believed she would be allowed to feel. In that moment, she realized something powerful. The dream of a car, of walking with ease to work, was only a fragment of a bigger dream, one she hadn't dared to hope for. The dream of love, of companionship, of a life where she was truly seen and valued. She held his gaze, trembling but strong, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her story was changing in ways more beautiful than she had ever imagined. Alice's life had always been defined by discipline and responsibility. For years, her routine was simple. Long shifts at the hospital, quick meals at home, and quiet evenings spent studying or dreaming of the day when she would no longer have to walk for hours under the burning sun or the cold rain. She had lived on survival mode for so long that she had never allowed herself the luxury of romance. Love was something she had only read about in books or observed from afar in the lives of patients who whispered their stories to her when loneliness overcame them. But now, with Christian in her life, everything felt different. There was an unfamiliar sweetness in her days. She would wake up exhausted but smiling, knowing that at some point she would hear his voice, that she might see his eyes light up when she walked toward him. She still held on to her modest dream of buying the car, but something had shifted. The car was no longer the center of her hopes. Now, the dream felt wider, filled with companionship, laughter, and a possibility she had never dared to imagine. Building a life with someone who cherished her. Christian, too, was changing in ways he hadn't expected. His family was one of the wealthiest in the city, owners of a chain of companies that carried their name like a crown. Since childhood, he had been groomed to lead, to manage, to uphold the family's image of power and control. He had studied at the finest schools, attended the most exclusive events, and was surrounded by people who bowed to his name. Yet all of it had left him feeling hollow, as though his existence was trapped in a gilded cage. Meeting Alice had been like a breath of air he hadn't realized he was starving for. Her humility, her kindness, and her resilience made him see the world through new eyes. But with that change came the weight of reality. His family, particularly his mother, was not known for tolerance toward those outside their social circle. Christian knew that the moment Alice entered his world, she would face judgment, whispers, and disapproval. And yet, the thought of letting her go was unbearable. Their relationship blossomed quietly in the weeks that followed. They shared simple dinners in little restaurants Alice loved, far away from the glamorous places Christian was used to. They strolled through parks, talking about everything and nothing, sometimes holding hands in silence that spoke louder than words. To Alice, Christian was more than the man who had saved her that day. He was her confidant, her safe place. For Christian, Alice was proof that love could be pure, untainted by wealth or status. Still, Alice could not silence the doubts inside her heart. Every time she saw Christian's sleek car, every time she noticed the expensive watch on his wrist, she felt a quiet ache of inadequacy. What could she offer him, really? She was just a nurse, living in a small rented apartment, saving every penny to build a future piece by piece. She worried that someday he would wake up and realize she did not belong in his life. The storm of truth came sooner than she expected. One Saturday evening, Christian invited Alice to a formal charity event his family was hosting at a grand hotel downtown. At first, Alice hesitated. The very idea of stepping into a room full of millionaires in her modest dress made her stomach twist. But Christian, sensing her fear, held her hands and said softly, "I don't want you to hide from the world. I want them to see the woman who changed me." His words melted her resistance, and though she was terrified, she agreed. The night of the event, Alice stood before the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the borrowed dress a friend had lent her. It was simple but elegant, a soft blue fabric that complemented her gentle features. She applied a touch of makeup, not to disguise herself but to feel a little braver. When Christian arrived to pick her up, he was struck silent for a moment. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and he whispered with awe, "You're breathtaking." The ride to the event was filled with quiet anticipation. Alice clutched her small purse tightly, trying to calm her nerves. When they arrived, the grand hotel was alive with glittering lights, laughter, and the hum of an orchestra. Men in tailored suits and women in gowns adorned with jewels filled the hall. Alice felt small, almost invisible, yet Christian's hand in hers anchored her. But the whispers began almost immediately. Curious eyes scanned her from head to toe, their expressions a mix of curiosity, disdain, and shock. Some smiled politely, but others whispered behind champagne glasses, questioning who she was and why Christian, of all people, had brought her. Alice felt the sting of their judgment like daggers, but she lifted her chin, determined not to show weakness. The sharpest blow came when Christian's mother approached. Dressed in a gown that shimmered like silver, she carried herself like a queen. Her smile was cold, her eyes sharper than any blade. She greeted Alice with a polite nod, then turned to her son. "Christian, may I speak to you privately?" Alice excused herself with grace, but her chest burned with anxiety as she watched them walk away. She could not hear the conversation, but she could see the tension in Christian's shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. His mother's face hardened, her voice low but firm. She was telling him what Alice had feared all along, that a nurse, no matter how kind or beautiful, had no place in their world. When Christian returned, his smile was forced, his eyes heavy with unspoken words. Alice knew then that her fears had not been unfounded. The evening dragged on, each moment a test of her composure. She smiled when necessary, spoke politely when addressed, but inside she was unraveling. By the end of the night, she longed to escape the suffocating luxury and return to the simplicity of her world. On the ride home, silence filled the car. Finally, Alice spoke, her voice trembling. "Christian, I don't belong there. I could see it in their eyes. I could hear it in their whispers. And your mother?" She trailed off, unable to finish. Christian pulled the car over and turned to her, his eyes fierce. "Alice, listen to me. I don't care what they think. I don't care what my mother says. You belong with me. I won't let anyone take that away from us." Her heart ached at his words, at the passion in his voice. Yet she also knew that love was not always enough to silence the world. Still, when he reached for her hand, she held it tightly, choosing in that moment to trust him. The weeks that followed were difficult. Christian's family grew more vocal in their disapproval, pressuring him to end the relationship. Friends he had known for years distanced themselves, unable to understand why he would choose a simple nurse over the countless wealthy women who would gladly take her place. Alice, too, struggled. The whispers at work, the worried glances from her friends, the weight of doubt pressed on her daily. But through it all, they clung to each other. Christian began spending more time in Alice's world, helping her with groceries, cooking simple meals together in her tiny kitchen, walking with her to the hospital when she worked late shifts. He told her he felt more alive in those moments than he ever had in the grand halls of his family's estate. One rainy evening, as they sat together on her small couch, Alice finally voiced the fear that had haunted her. "Christian, what if one day you regret this? What if you wake up and realize you've given up too much?" He looked at her, his expression gentle but unwavering. "Alice, the only thing I would regret is losing you. You've given me something I never had before, something money can't buy. You've given me love, and that's worth more than all the wealth in the world." Tears filled her eyes as she leaned into his embrace, her heart finally daring to believe in the strength of what they shared. But destiny was not done testing them. Soon, an unexpected event would force Christian to make a choice that would change both of their lives forever. One that would either prove their love unshakable or tear it apart. The weeks after the charity event weighed heavily on Alice's heart. Every glance, every whisper, every subtle reminder that she did not belong in Christian's world clung to her like a shadow. And yet, he remained steadfast. He showed up at her door with groceries after long shifts, brought her coffee when she looked exhausted, and reminded her in 1,000 small ways that he had no intention of letting her go. But love, as strong as it was, rarely walked without challenges. One late afternoon, Christian received a phone call from his father. His family's company was in negotiations for a massive merger, one that would expand their empire across borders. The catch was simple but cruel. The board of directors, and especially his parents, believed that Christian's relationship with Alice was a liability. If he wanted to be entrusted with leadership of the company, he had to make better choices, as his father coldly phrased it. Christian's chest tightened as he ended the call. It wasn't just about the business, it was about control. They wanted to force him into the mold they had crafted for him since childhood, even if it meant breaking the one thing that truly mattered to him. That night, when Christian arrived at Alice's apartment, she noticed the heaviness in his eyes. "What happened?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then told her the truth. The words felt like shards of glass cutting through her chest. She stared at him in silence, her mind racing. "So, they're asking you to choose between me and your future," she whispered. Christian reached for her hands immediately. "No, Alice. I'm not choosing between you and anything. You are my future. I don't care about the company, the merger, the wealth. None of it matters if I don't have you." Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but deep down, fear whispered cruelly. Would he still feel that way when the weight of losing everything truly fell on him? The following days tested their bond more than ever. Christian's parents arranged meetings with influential families, casually introducing him to women more suitable for his status. They made it clear that Alice would never be accepted. Meanwhile, Alice felt the sting of judgment at work too. Nurses whispered. Doctors raised their eyebrows when they saw her being picked up by Christian's luxury car. One evening, overwhelmed by the pressure, Alice sat Christian down. Her voice shook as she spoke. "Christian, I love you. But maybe loving me is destroying everything you've worked for. Maybe I'm holding you back." His reaction was immediate, almost desperate. "Don't you ever say that. You are the only thing that has given my life meaning. Without you, all of it, the money, the company, the expectations, it's just an empty prison." He cupped her face in his hands, his voice breaking. "Alice, I'd give it all up for you. Gladly." But life had one more twist prepared. A week later, Christian's mother came to see Alice privately. Dressed elegantly as always, she carried an air of quiet authority. Sitting across from Alice in the small kitchen, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word was precise, sharp. "You are a good woman, Alice, but you must know this isn't your place. My son has responsibilities, a legacy to uphold. If you truly love him, let him go before he ruins his future for you." Alice listened in silence, her heart aching with every syllable. After she left, Alice sat alone for hours, her mind torn between the fierce love she felt and the crushing weight of guilt. Was she selfish to hold on to him when the cost was so high? That night, when Christian arrived, she broke down in his arms. "Your mother came to see me," she confessed. "She asked me to let you go. Maybe she's right. Maybe walking away is the only way to protect you." Christian held her tightly, his own heart breaking at her words. "No, Alice, don't let her win. Don't let them decide our fate. I don't want a life without you." Her tears soaked his shirt, but deep down, she felt a new strength stirring. For so long, she had lived her life surviving, working, sacrificing. But now, she realized love wasn't just about sacrifice. It was about standing together, unshaken by the storms. The next day, Alice made her choice. She showed up at the family's corporate building, nerves twisting in her stomach. When Christian's parents saw her standing there, they exchanged looks of cold disbelief. But Alice didn't flinch. She looked them in the eyes and spoke with quiet determination. "I know you don't approve of me. I know you think I don't belong. But I love your son, and he loves me. I'm not leaving him, not because I want to destroy his future, but because I believe we can build a new one together. I may not have wealth, but I have strength, and I will stand by him no matter what. If that makes me unworthy in your eyes, then so be it." For the first time, Christian's parents were left speechless. When Christian learned what she had done, his heart swelled with pride. He realized that Alice wasn't just his love. She was his equal, his partner, someone who would fight for them just as fiercely as he fought for her. And though the battle with his family was far from over, in that moment, they both knew one thing. Their love was no longer fragile. It was unshakable. A storm had tried to tear them apart, but together, they had chosen to stand strong. And destiny, watching quietly, was already preparing the next surprise. One that would forever redefine what love, sacrifice, and happiness truly meant. The days after Alice confronted Christian's parents marked a quiet but powerful shift in their story. For the first time, Alice had faced them not as the poor nurse they looked down upon, but as the woman who loved their son with unshakable resolve. Christian couldn't stop replaying her words in his head. To him, it wasn't just courage. It was proof that what they had was stronger than any obstacle. But his parents weren't done. His father, cold and practical as always, scheduled a private meeting with Christian. In the towering glass office overlooking the city, he delivered his ultimatum. "Son, the board is watching. The merger is in jeopardy. If you insist on staying with her, you will lose your seat at this table. You'll walk away from everything we've built for generations." Christian sat in silence, his hands clasped tightly. A younger version of himself might have caved under the pressure. But now, with Alice's love anchoring him, the words that left his lips were steady. "Then I'll walk away, because what you've built isn't mine, it never was. My future is with her, not with your empire." His father's face darkened, but Christian stood up and left the office without a second thought. Meanwhile, Alice faced her own battle. Word of her relationship with Christian spread quickly through the hospital halls. Some colleagues smiled at her with a mixture of curiosity and envy, while others whispered behind her back. "She's just using him," one nurse muttered when she thought Alice wasn't listening. "There's no way someone like him would actually love her." Alice swallowed the sting of their words, but when she got home, she couldn't hide her hurt. Christian found her sitting on the couch, eyes red, clutching her pillow. He knelt before her and took her hand. "Let them talk," he whispered. "They don't know us. They don't see the nights we spend laughing, the mornings we spend dreaming. I don't care what they say, Alice. I choose you every single day." Her heart melted, and for the first time, she truly believed him without reservation. The real turning point, however, came unexpectedly. One morning, while Alice was rushing through her shift, the hospital was thrown into chaos. A massive accident on the highway had brought in dozens of injured patients. Among them was a young child, barely 7 years old, clinging to life. Alice, calm under pressure, led the team through critical procedures, her quick thinking and steady hands saving the boy's life. Unbeknownst to her, Christian's mother was at the hospital that day, visiting a friend. She happened to witness the scene from the waiting area, watching as Alice commanded respect and admiration from the doctors and nurses around her. Gone was the image of a simple nurse unworthy of her son. Instead, she saw a woman who was strong, brilliant, compassionate, and undeniably extraordinary. Later that evening, when Christian's mother returned home, she was quieter than usual. His father noticed but said nothing. That night, she pulled out a photograph of her own younger self, a woman who had once dreamed of becoming a doctor but had abandoned her ambitions to marry into wealth. For the first time, she saw a reflection of the woman she could have been in Alice. The very next day, she asked to meet Alice privately once again. Alice was hesitant, her heart pounding with nerves, but she agreed. Sitting across the table, Christian's mother's tone was softer this time. "Alice," she began, "I misjudged you. I thought you were after his money. I thought you didn't belong in his world. But yesterday, I saw something. I saw your strength, your dedication. The way people looked at you, it was with respect. And I realized something. My son doesn't love you in spite of who you are. He loves you because of who you are." Alice's eyes filled with tears at the unexpected words. "I love him with everything I have," she whispered. His mother reached across the table and took her hand. "Then maybe it's time I stop standing in your way." When Christian found out what had happened, he was stunned. For the first time, his mother wasn't an obstacle. She was an ally. And though his father still resisted, the wall that had once stood between their worlds had begun to crack. But the true surprise was yet to come. Weeks later, Alice finally saved enough money, this time with Christian by her side, to walk into the dealership and buy the car she had dreamed of for so long. As she stood there, holding the keys in her hands, tears streamed down her face. It wasn't just about the car. It was about everything it represented. Her hard work, her resilience, her refusal to give up despite life's hardships. Christian hugged her tightly, whispering in her ear, "This isn't just your dream anymore. It's ours. And I promise, Alice, every dream you have, I'll be there to help make it real." That night, as they drove the car through the city lights, laughter echoing in the air, both of them felt it. The shift from uncertainty to something lasting, unbreakable. They weren't just two people from different worlds anymore. They were building one world together. And though challenges still lay ahead, Alice and Christian knew this truth in their hearts. Love wasn't about wealth or status. It wasn't about approval or legacy. It was about finding someone who saw you for who you truly were, and choosing them again and again no matter what. And that choice, they both knew, had already been made. Alice stood in the hospital corridor, her hands still trembling from the long shift she had just finished. The echoes of patients' voices and the steady beeping of monitors faded into the background as she thought about the last months of her life. Her journey had begun with simple dreams. Just to own a car, to walk a little less, to save a little more. Yet, life had carried her into places she never expected. Fear, loss, rescue, and then something she had once believed was reserved only for fairy tales, love. Christian had been by her side through it all, his presence strong and steady. He was no longer just the man who had stepped in at her moment of despair. He had become the man who had shown her that vulnerability was not weakness, and that hope was not naive. And yet, as Alice prepared to leave for the day, doubts gnawed at her. She wondered if their worlds could truly fit together. She was the daughter of a seamstress and a construction worker, a woman who had stitched every piece of her life with effort and sacrifice. He was born into privilege, a man who never had to worry about the price of bread or the pain of walking miles to save a bus fare. Though Christian never made her feel small, she feared the world outside might never stop reminding her of their differences. As she stepped outside, the night air greeted her with a cool breeze. And there he was, leaning against his car, his smile waiting only for her. "I thought I'd surprise you," Christian said, his voice warm. "I know you've been walking all day inside the hospital, so I didn't want you walking home, too." Alice's lips curved into a smile, though her heart was heavy with unspoken questions. "You don't have to keep doing this," she whispered. Christian tilted his head, curious. Doing what? Saving me? She said softly, her eyes lowering. You've already given me more than I could ever deserve. He reached out, gently lifting her chin until her gaze met his. Alice, love isn't about debts or balance sheets. I didn't save you that day because I felt you owed me. I did it because something in me couldn't stand to see you lose what you had worked so hard for. And now, I'm here because I can't stand to imagine my life without you. Her chest tightened, a knot of emotions she could barely contain. But what if people think I'm with you for the wrong reasons? What if? Let them think what they want, Christian interrupted, his voice firm yet tender. I know who you are. I've seen the way you care for your patients, the way you sacrifice without expecting recognition, the way you smile even when life weighs heavy on your shoulders. Alice, you're the strongest woman I've ever met, and I don't care if the world understands us or not. What matters is that I do. Tears blurred her vision as she realized that the doubts she carried were her own, not his. He didn't see her as less. He saw her as everything. They drove together in silence for a while, his hand reaching for hers across the console, their fingers intertwining with an ease that felt eternal. After a few minutes, Christian turned down an unfamiliar road. Alice frowned. This isn't the way to my house. I know, he said, his smile mysterious. There's something I want to show you. Curiosity battled with nervousness in her chest, but she trusted him. The car slowed to a stop outside a brightly lit dealership. Her breath caught as she recognized it, the very place she had been heading on the day everything changed. Why are we here? She whispered. Christian stepped out of the car and walked around to open her door. Taking her hand, he led her inside, where a salesman was waiting. But instead of heading toward the desk, Christian stopped in front of a sleek, modest car. Simple, practical, yet undeniably beautiful. Alice's eyes widened as she realized what he had done. You didn't, she said, her voice trembling. I did, Christian replied softly. This car, it's yours. She shook her head, her emotions flooding all at once. Christian, I can't accept this. I was saving for this myself. It was my dream, not a gift to be handed. He gently pressed a finger to her lips. You're right, which is why I didn't buy it. You did. Confusion flickered in her eyes until the salesman handed her a folder. Inside were the documents she had signed weeks ago, the ones she thought had been lost forever after the robbery. Her name was written clearly on the papers. The money she had fought for, the money she thought was gone, had been preserved and used exactly as she had intended. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears streamed freely. You kept it safe for me? Christian nodded. From the moment I got it back, I knew it wasn't mine to touch. I wanted you to have this exactly the way you dreamed of it. You earned every bit of it, Alice. All I did was make sure it found its way back to you. In that moment, the weight of everything she had carried, the fear, the doubt, the feeling of unworthiness, fell away. She realized that true love wasn't about being rescued. It was about being seen. And Christian had seen her in ways no one else ever had. She turned to him, her voice breaking with gratitude. You didn't just give me back my dream, Christian. You gave me back my faith in people, in myself. He smiled, his eyes glistening with emotion. And you gave me something I never knew I needed. You gave me a reason to be more than what I was born into. You gave me love, Alice. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Around them, the lights of the dealership seemed to glow brighter, as if the universe itself was celebrating their union. When they finally pulled away, Alice rested her forehead against his. So what happens now? She whispered. Christian laughed softly. Now we drive. To anywhere, everywhere. Because with you, Alice, the destination doesn't matter. And so they did. That night, under a canopy of stars, Alice drove her car for the very first time, with Christian by her side. The road stretched out endlessly before them, a symbol of the life they would build together. Filled with challenges, yes, but also with love, resilience, and the quiet certainty that they had found something worth holding on to forever. For Alice, the girl who once walked alone in the cold to chase a humble dream, and for Christian, the man who once thought he had everything but realized he had nothing without love. This was only the beginning. And the most surprising part? The dream that had started with a car became something much greater. A journey toward a future neither of them had ever imagined, but both now knew they were destined to share.